What's up everybody, welcome back to another video, and in this video I'm going to be sort of talking about the state of gaming on Linux. And this may be a little bit of a controversial video. Gaming on Linux is not the best. I'm just going to be very flat out and truthful about the state of gaming on Linux. Now all of this is going to be from my experiences specifically. So someone else who is playing video games on Linux may not have any problems, and they may not have any issues with the things that I have issues with. But this is mainly coming from the perspective of somebody who used to game on Windows less than a year ago, literally about 1 month ago. So I had Linux for a while on my machine. I had to end up switching back to Windows for school. When I was back on Windows, I played a bunch of video games and stuff like that. A bunch of Fortnite. Well, not a bunch of Fortnite, but I had Fortnite for playing with friends. And there's a lot of things that I want to clarify when talking about gaming on Linux, because gaming on Linux has definitely made some huge strides in the past, 4 months or so. Huge strides. But it's nowhere near as friendly to gaming as Windows is. And I was watching a video recently where someone was saying that the performance was better. Now, I kind of laughed at that, because the performance is not better. In mini games. Now, some games, yeah, it is better, but mini games, it is not. I think in Unturned, I get 10 frames less. And in a lot of games, I get less frame rates. These are usually in games that use DirectX. And it's pretty normal to get less frame rates in a game that uses DirectX if you are on Linux. But another thing that this guy said was that they're more stable because you can hold back on updates, and updates won't break your game. Now, I don't think that this person had used Windows recently, because he was in the mindset that games get updates that break the game on newer versions of Windows. And maybe that happened in Windows 7. I don't know, but that does not happen in Windows 10. At least it hasn't happened to me in the past 2 years or so. Yeah, it doesn't happen, because most games are made specifically for Windows, even if they are compatible with Mac OS. That kind of thing happens with Mac OS, but with Windows that does not happen. Unless if it is a very old game for Windows XP or something like that, then that would happen. But if it is a game specifically made for Windows 10, it won't be broken by a new update, because that update was made to run specifically on Windows 10. And yeah, those were two things that he kind of got wrong. So the stability thing, that kind of makes sense. If you want to, although it's not necessarily stability, it's just you wanting to hold back on updates. And that could be kind of cool if you didn't want a new update. That doesn't necessarily work on online games and stuff. You can't do that, but if you wanted to on single player, you can. But with that said, the state of Linux gaming is absolutely fantastic. It's nowhere near as bad as everyone seems to think it is who is outside of the Linux community. You can get games to run pretty well on Wine, and with the introduction of Steam Proton, everything is working a lot better. I don't use Steam Proton because I'm one of those people who would rather use just native games. But yeah, okay, so if you guys are noticing frame rate issues, I know I am in the preview here. Not totally sure if they're coming out in the final video, but they probably are. Now this may have to do with the CPU usage. But yeah, just be aware that that is a thing that's happening. I'm getting frame rate issues on the preview here, but just to sort of talk about the state of Linux gaming, I have got 11 games on my computer. I got Cities Skylines, got Game Dev Tycoon, Payday 2, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2. You know what? I wish they got the first one on Linux. I know you can download from Wine, but I'm not going to do that. Also, Unturned works. Not very well at all. There's usually some sort of graphical glitch going on. I think you can fix that, but I haven't messed with it yet. There's Stranded Deep. From what I remember, that works fairly well, but I haven't played it yet since I downloaded it. Tropico 5, which is pretty cool. I didn't know that that was for Linux when I switched to Linux just recently. I'm currently using Linux Mint 2, and I like the Cinnamon desktop with the desklets and stuff. Those are pretty useful for monitoring system usage and stuff. So, gaming is very good on Linux. There's no doubt that it's very good. But I really have a problem with people who make it out to seem like it's better than it is. Because we shouldn't be sugarcoating things like gaming on Linux if we want people to switch to Linux. We need to figure out a way to make Linux look better than Windows without having to sugarcoat things. It's not a very good thing to do in many ways to get people using Linux. The whole reason I ended up switching to Linux is mainly because Mac OS couldn't be downloaded on a Windows PC. But that's a topic for a whole other day, not a topic for today. So, alright, so my final opinions on gaming on Linux. I sort of did a bunch of rambling in this. You might not even know what I'm trying to say, but gaming on Linux is very good. Gaming on Linux is not bad by any means. Most people can get Linux and play video games, but there is absolutely no reason to switch to Linux specifically for playing video games. No reason whatsoever. If you are someone who plays video games all of the time, and you play like the really popular AAA video games, stuff like that, you won't want to switch to Linux. That's just how it is. If you are one of those weird gamers who only use the Epic Store and only got onto PC gaming like 2 months ago or so, you don't want to switch to Linux. If you are one of those people who only use Origin because you only play EA games, you don't want to switch to Linux. If you use Steam, you'll want to switch to Linux depending on what games you play. Linux is very fun, but it's very fun to use. It's really fun to mess with, in my opinion. But for people who want stability, and for people who want all of their games just to work, and for people who don't want to go through the hassle of messing with setting up the games that they want to play, they should use Windows. It's nowhere near as hard as it was to set up games on Linux and stuff like that, and play games on Linux. And yeah, it's not as hard as it was, but it's still much harder than what most casual computer users want to mess with, and I know that for an absolute fact. Many people in my family would get absolutely confused on just setting up Linux at all to even run well. Like, setting up drivers and stuff is not anywhere near as intuitive as it is in Windows, because in Windows it is ingrained into people's minds when they think of setting something up on Windows, setting up drivers. But it's not in Linux. People are confused. They don't know what to do in Linux because it's not as mainstream. So yeah, I would never recommend playing games as a way to switch to Linux, ever. Although it's getting easier and if you want to try out Linux, you probably won't have a problem with getting at least half of your favorite games to work properly through Steam Proton. And there's plenty of games such as Kingdom Come Deliverance that are really good, that work very well on Linux. Although you do have to like switch one or two folders around, but that's not hard. Windows users do that type of thing normally, usually. But yeah, so hopefully this didn't just confuse people who are watching this. It might have, because I was rambling all the time, but yeah, I think that that sort of sums up, not necessarily sums up, sort of says what my opinions are on this current state of gaming on Linux. It's good, but it's not as good as I would want it to be, and not as good as it would need to be for me to recommend people wanting to play a lot of games to switch to Linux, or using gaming as a reason to switch to Linux. So yeah, I hope you all liked the video. Hope you all found it helpful in any way. And I will see you all in the next video.